first, it feels like just another piece of paperwork. One more clause, one more signature, one more thing to get through on the way to finally being free. But hidden deep in custody agreements are sentences that don't just divide time, they divide power. And the worst part, most women don't even see it coming. Every week, women walk into courtrooms thinking they're protecting their children, only to walk out with legal chains they didn't agree to, but signed anyway. The language is subtle, the tone sounds reasonable, but the outcome? It can quietly strip away a mother's rights, leverage, and ability to fight back later. As a former divorce attorney, I've seen firsthand how custody settlements are weaponized, not with loud threats, but with silent traps that look like fairness, but function like control. In this video, I'm going to expose 7 of the most dangerous custody clauses that leave women powerless and how to spot them before it's too late. This isn't legal advice. This is survival insight from someone who sat on the other side of that table, listening to women cry after realizing they agreed to something that can't be undone. If you're heading into a custody battle or know someone who is, stay with me. Because what you don't know about that settlement could cost you far more than custody. It could cost you your voice, your freedom, your future. Let's get into it. Sounds fair, right? Joint legal custody. Most people hear that and think, we'll share decisions equally. No one has more control than the other. But here's what they don't realize. When you agree to joint legal custody, you're not just sharing decisions. You're giving your ex the power to stall, interfere, or manipulate every single parenting choice you make. I've seen this play out again and again. A mother wants to move her child to a better school. Her ex disagrees. Suddenly she's stuck because joint legal custody means both parents must agree or nothing changes. It doesn't matter if she's the primary caregiver. It doesn't matter if the move is clearly better for the child. If he says no, it's no. And here's where it gets worse. Some exes use this clause as leverage, not because they care about the school or the doctor or the summer camp, but because they know it keeps you tied to them. Every decision becomes a negotiation, and every negotiation becomes a battle. You can't switch pediatricians without a fight. You can't even get a passport for your child without his signature. This isn't co-parenting, this is co-control. And if your ex is the type to punish you by saying no just because he can, joint legal custody becomes a weapon. It looks good on paper, it sounds balanced, but in practice, it can feel like you're constantly asking for permission. The most dangerous part? Judges love it. Courts prefer joint legal custody because it appears fair, but they're not the ones stuck emailing your ex every time your child needs something. They're not the ones watching your kids suffer because your ex refuses to agree out of spite. If you're going through a custody case, pay close attention to this clause. Don't just assume joint legal means peaceful cooperation. Because once it's in the order, it's hard to undo. And if your ex is more interested in control than co-parenting, that joint agreement might leave you completely stuck. And sadly, this is just the beginning. Most people think child support is the full extent of financial responsibility. He pays a set amount each month, done. But buried in the fine print of custody agreements are financial traps that catch women off guard, especially if they're not reading closely or don't have a lawyer who truly advocates for them. Here's the reality. Child expenses rarely stop at support payments. There's school tuition, extracurriculars, medical bills, therapy, travel, clothing, even the cost of daycare during your work hours. And unless your custody agreement spells out exactly how these costs are shared, how much, how often, who pays who, guess what happens? You end up covering them. Or worse, fighting every single time a new expense comes up. And that's not even the worst part. Some agreements are intentionally vague. One line like parties shall share extracurricular costs might seem harmless, but without specifics, what counts as extracurricular? What percentage is each parent responsible for? Is there a cap? Your ex can simply say no, or agree at first, then refuse to pay later, leaving you to front the bill or risk pulling your child out of an activity they love. I once saw a woman whose ex agreed to private school. It was in the parenting plan, but he forgot to pay his share of tuition. Every month, she covered both halves just to keep her son enrolled. Legally, she could take him to court, but by then the debt was piling up and the emotional toll was already doing damage. The financial power play had worked. And here's what's often misunderstood. The more vague the agreement, the more power your ex holds. And when you're the one who won't let your child suffer, you become the one who pays, literally and emotionally. You carry the weight, while he gets to say, well, it's not my responsibility. So before signing anything, demand clarity. How much? How often? Who decides? Don't let your financial stability hang on someone else's moods or manipulations, because what's written in that agreement will shape your day-to-day life for years. And once it's signed, it's hard and expensive to fix. But financial manipulation is only one part of this web. There's another level of control that hits even closer to home. It's the phrase that sounds noble, protected, and beyond question, the best interests of the child. Every custody hearing, every negotiation, every court order claims to revolve around this standard. But here's what most people don't realize. That phrase is one of the most flexible and dangerously subjective tools in family court. And more often than not, it's used to trap mothers into silence or submission. Let's be clear, judges don't live in your home. They don't see the subtle intimidation, the mind games, the calculated emotional abuse that happens behind closed doors. So when a woman tries to explain that her ex isn't just difficult, but actually manipulative or unsafe, she's often told she's being emotional or vindictive or trying to alienate the father. The court may then label her a high conflict parent, a term that sounds neutral, but is weaponized to undermine her credibility. Meanwhile, the man, who might have years of coercive behavior behind him, plays calm, reasonable, even charming in court. He talks about stability and co-parenting, while behind the scenes, he's threatening to withhold the kids, delay pickups, or make joint decision-making a daily battle. But because he doesn't raise his voice or leave bruises, the system often gives him the benefit of the doubt. One former client, let's call her Dana, had documented emails, recordings, and years of silent manipulation. Her ex never hit her, but he gaslit her daily, undermined her in front of the kids, refused to share medical updates, changed schedules last minute just to disrupt her work. But when she brought it to court, the judge said, there's no evidence of danger. This seems like a communication issue. Joint custody is in the best interests of the child. Dana walked out of court feeling like she was being punished for speaking up. And she's not alone. Many women realize too late that best interests can be twisted into whatever serves the court's desire for balance, even if that balance puts a child in a toxic environment. Here's the part that stings. When a woman fights for safety, she's seen as difficult. When she stays silent to protect peace, she's seen as agreeable. Either way, her voice is diminished. And that's exactly how the custody trap works, by framing control and manipulation as co-parenting and painting resistance as instability. But the most dangerous part? Once this narrative takes hold, it becomes nearly impossible to reverse. And what happens next can leave a mother permanently sidelined. On paper, 50/50 custody sounds fair. Equal time with both parents, shared responsibility, no one parent burdened with more than the other. But in practice, it can be a carefully disguised tool used to maintain control, and most women don't see it coming until it's too late. Family courts often push for equal parenting time under the banner of fairness. But what they don't account for is context. They don't ask who did the bulk of caregiving before the split, who managed doctor visits, school routines, emotional support, meals, bedtime. They simply divide the calendar without considering the history. And in doing so, they ignore something crucial. Not all parents are equally involved or equally safe. Here's how it plays out. A man who barely participated in the day-to-day parenting before separation suddenly demands 50/50. Why? Not because he wants to co-parent, because he wants leverage. With shared custody, he can reduce or eliminate child support. He can use the kids as pawns to control schedules, location, and decisions. He can keep his ex entangled in a cycle of coordination, negotiation, and conflict under the legal guise of co-parenting. Take Alicia, for example. She was the primary caregiver for her 2 children their whole lives. Her ex worked late, traveled often, and barely knew their routines. But when they separated, he pushed hard for 50/50 custody. In court, he said all the right things. He wanted to be more involved. He loved his kids. He deserved equal time. The judge agreed. Within months, Alicia was managing 2 households. Her kids were constantly transitioning, confused, tired, and acting out. Her ex began withholding communication, skipping pickups, and blaming her when things fell apart. But legally, she had no ground to stand on. He had equal rights. And if she protested, she risked being labeled uncooperative or worse. accused of trying to alienate the children. This is the quiet power of 50/50 custody. It looks balanced, but often forces women into situations where they carry the full emotional labor of parenting without the authority or support they once had. They're expected to make it work, smile through the dysfunction, and avoid rocking the boat for the kids' sake. What's more, the court rarely follows up. Once the order is signed, there's little oversight. No one checks if both parents are truly following through, and women afraid of dragging their kids through another legal battle often stay silent. So the next time someone tells you 50/50 is the fairest option, ask, fair for whom? Because when it's used as a tool of control, the parent with the most history, the deepest connection, and the greatest responsibility often ends up with the least power. And that imbalance, it's anything but equal. You probably heard it before. Judges always say their decisions are based on the best interest of the child. It sounds noble, objective, protective, but here's what most people don't realize. That phrase is incredibly vague. And because it's so open to interpretation, it's often used to justify outcomes that actually put children and their primary caregivers at a disadvantage. On paper, it should mean stability, safety, emotional well-being, and consistent caregiving. But in courtrooms, it can mean something very different. Judges often rely on surface-level assessments: who looks more put together, who speaks more calmly, who has a steady job and a clean criminal record. But they rarely dig into the hidden dynamics, like emotional abuse, manipulation, or controlling behavior, that leaves no physical scars but wreaks havoc on a child's development. And here's the painful truth. Abusers can look incredibly convincing in court. They know how to charm, they know how to present themselves, and they're often banking on the fact that the woman sitting across from them, the one who's been surviving, not performing, is too exhausted, too traumatized, or too afraid to fight back in the way the court expects. Take Maya's story. She had endured years of subtle emotional abuse, gaslighting, isolation, financial control, but none of it showed up on paper. No police reports, no bruises, nothing provable. When she finally filed for custody, her ex flipped the narrative. He claimed she was unstable, bitter, and trying to turn the kids against him. He spoke calmly, she was shaking, he brought witnesses, she brought tears. The judge called it a he said, she said, and ruled in favor of joint custody, saying it was in the best interest of the children to maintain a relationship with both parents. But what about the nights those kids cried themselves to sleep after being dropped off? What about the anxiety, the stomach aches, the regression in school? None of that was factored in. The phrase best interests gives the illusion of protection, but it often masks a system that values appearances over patterns, quick judgments over deep understanding. And in this gap, many mothers find themselves fighting not just for their rights, but for their children's emotional survival. If you're entering custody court thinking that truth will automatically prevail, think again. What's considered best is often based on outdated assumptions and incomplete information. That's why understanding how this phrase is interpreted and how to build your case around what truly matters isn't just smart, it's necessary, because when the legal system prioritizes balance over safety, and peace on paper over chaos behind closed doors, the best interests of the child can become just another phrase that sounds good while failing the people it's meant to protect. What most women don't see coming is the way custody battles are used as a financial weapon. It's not just about parenting, it's about power. And when your ex has more money, more time, or simply less to lose, the court becomes a battlefield you can't afford to stay on, but also can't afford to leave. Let's talk numbers. Legal fees in custody cases can easily stretch into the tens of thousands. If your ex is dragging out the process, filing motions, requesting evaluations, pushing delays, it's not always about winning custody. Sometimes it's about draining you financially, emotionally, until you're forced to settle for less just to survive. It's a quiet kind of manipulation. You're told you have rights. You're told the law is fair. But then you're stuck in courtrooms where every hour costs more than your weekly grocery bill, where every email from your lawyer feels like a countdown to bankruptcy. Meanwhile, your ex may be sitting on assets, hiding income, or using shared finances to fund the fight against you. And here's the trap. Speaking up might cost you your kids, but staying quiet could cost you everything else. Many women start out determined to fight, but end up agreeing to compromise just to stop the bleeding. They accept unsafe visitation schedules. They agree to decisions they don't believe in, not because they want to, but because they have no financial fight left. The system doesn't protect the financially vulnerable, it punishes them. And when money becomes the deciding factor in who gets the better lawyer, who lasts longer in court, or who looks more stable, justice starts looking a lot like privilege. There are women right now living in fear of retaliation if they push too hard. Not just physical fear, but financial retaliation, child support being withheld, shared accounts frozen, jobs sabotaged through false claims, all designed to wear them down. So what do you do when speaking the truth could cost you everything and staying silent still leads to loss? That's the heart of the custody trap. It's not just about where the child sleeps. It's about who controls the narrative and who controls the resources. If no one's warned you about this side of the courtroom, now you know. Because in a system where justice often comes with a price tag, silence isn't just survival. It's something you're forced into by design. On paper, family court is supposed to prioritize one thing: the best interest of the child. It's a phrase that gets repeated over and over like a sacred promise, but ask any woman who's actually been through a custody fight and she'll tell you those 5 words don't always mean what you think. The reality is this: best interest can be twisted, stretched, and reshaped depending on who has the stronger attorney, the cleaner narrative, or the more strategic emotional presentation. It's not just about who's the better parent, it's about who looks better on paper, who sounds calmer in court, who shows fewer cracks under pressure. We've seen women labeled unstable because they cried during testimony, while men who remain stone-faced are praised for their composure. We've seen mothers punished for working long hours to support their kids, while fathers with flexible schedules are handed more custody time simply because they were available. And we've seen judges interpret the same situation in completely opposite ways, depending on what story they're sold. Here's what's worse. Abusers often know how to weaponize this phrase. They'll claim the mother is trying to alienate the child, that she's controlling, that she's emotional or unpredictable. And once those labels are out there, they stick, no matter how baseless they are. Meanwhile, the woman who raised the child, protected them, sacrificed everything, is suddenly on the defensive, having to prove she's not what someone else claims. You start to realize that in custody court, truth and outcome don't always align. And that best interest can sometimes be a mask for something much messier: bias, misunderstanding, or a system too overwhelmed to look deeper. The heartbreaking part? Children get caught in the middle, pulled between narratives, used as leverage, told conflicting versions of what's best for them. And while the adults argue in court, the child's emotional safety quietly erodes. So if you're entering a custody battle thinking logic and fairness will guide the process, think again. You need to know that the words best interests of the child sound comforting, but they are not a guarantee. They're a legal tool, one that can be used to help or to harm, depending on who's wielding it. If there's one truth that cuts deeper than most, it's this: the courtroom doesn't always protect the people it claims to serve. And for many women, custody battles aren't just legal disputes. They're emotional battlegrounds that leave lasting scars. Behind every case file is a mother who stayed up all night worried sick, a child caught in the crossfire, and a system that too often treats people like numbers instead of human beings. What we've uncovered today isn't just about laws or loopholes, it's about power. And when that power is misunderstood or manipulated, women are the ones left holding the fragments. The custody trap doesn't always look like a trap. Sometimes it's disguised as a compromise. Sometimes it's dressed up as what's best for the child. But underneath it all is a pattern where women's voices are questioned, their intentions doubted, and their instincts dismissed. If you're watching this and you've been through it, you're not alone. If you're facing it right now, arm yourself with knowledge. Don't go in assuming the system will automatically see your truth. Document everything, get support, know your rights, and most importantly, don't let anyone shame you into silence, because the more we speak up about how this system really works, the less power it has to keep operating in the shadows. Thank you for watching. If this video resonated with you, leave a comment below and let us know what part hit hardest. Your story might help someone else feel less alone. And if you found value in what we shared today, please like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. We'll see you in the next one.